All right, I'd like to have everybody rise for Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Danielle, does this work if I'm standing up? Yes. Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to just start off with a little bit of an introduction of what's happening here this evening so everybody is on the same page as we go through this. For clarity, this is the short-term vacation rental, and there was a committee that was formed 8 months ago? Approximately 8 months ago, to address the issues within the village of the short-term vacation rental. Right? That committee was comprised of, members of the community, village member, liaison, and et cetera, to represent all PACs and go through the development of the code. So what's happening tonight is the revision of the code has been released. And this is the committee's opportunity now to basically present to us, the board, that revision. And so that we have questions, and I'm sure you, the public, will also have questions about the code. But it's here to address code issues, all right? It's not here if you want to come up and talk like before and say, I run a short-term vacation as a rental, I run a short-term vacation rental, or I don't run a short-term vacation rental, and the pros and cons about that. We're here to discuss code issues. So I want to keep all your comments related to discussion on the code. Is that okay? Everybody got that? All right, so what I'd appreciate, I want to hear everybody. The board's going to have questions. It's called a workshop. It is not a public hearing, so therefore there is no voting going on tonight. It is really to be a discussion, and we can address things and have discuss things, and that's how we're going to all learn, including the board is going to learn about everything that's going on here this evening. So I appreciate you all coming. I'm anxious to hear what's going to happen, what the code is, and get some definition around it. And we'll begin by having Brant Nuneker, who was our board representative. He will present an overview, which is a memo that was released. I don't know if everybody got the draft that was sent out. If you didn't, there's drafts back on the table. If there's not enough, let us know. We'll make copies, and we'll make sure everybody has. But Trustee Nuneker will present to us, which is the board, with you on what the committee came up with. All right? Now, if you want to address a question, I would appreciate if you would step up to the microphone, state your first and last name so we know who you are, and then we can respond and have an interaction and try to get to it. But please allow time for everybody. Right? Because I'm sure everybody here may have a question of some kind or of some sort. So I don't want you to, your questions are all important, but don't monopolize it. All right? Very good. So I'm going to turn the meeting over now to the committee, and the committee will present to all of us. Thank you.
So the draft is prepared with the bold and underlined highlights, which would change the existing code. And there's copies available back there, as the mayor said. I just wanted to read this summary that I wrote. The draft introduces two new categories for short-term rentals. A short-term home rental use is introduced, which is very similar to the existing bed and breakfast establishment use. Short-term home rentals require a registered resident host, and non-hosted rentals are not permitted. This use includes short-term rentals for 3 to 5 bedrooms, but is not a traditional bed and breakfast in that no meals will typically be served. And also it would not allow signage like a bed and breakfast establishment. We've had the bed and breakfast establishment use in our code for forever. On the allowable use chart, short-term home rentals require a special permit in the residential, village center, and medical and professional districts. It's not an allowable use in the gateway business district, which I believe is just like the bed and breakfast establishment, right, Kevin? Or did you?
I'm not sure, actually, but probably, yeah.
The short-term room rental is an added use in the draft and replaces room rental home. That use is found in the code, the room rental home use. The short 2 bedrooms are owner-occupied and are either hosted or non-hosted. Now, we've added a definition of owner-occupied, which means that you live at the home for 240 days or more a year. Non-hosted rentals may not exceed 40 days per year, and no signage is allowed. So non-hosted rentals, 1 to 2 bedrooms, with a maximum of 40 days per year. Now, that was a hotly contested issue in the group. There's pretty much a plurality of us that came up with 40 nights. Some of us were opposed to that, others wanted more, and but it's pretty much a majority came up with 40. On the allowable use chart, short-term room rentals require an administrative permit in the residential and village center districts. Now, an administrative permit is a new discretionary permit which avoids the site plan review process. So it's an abbreviated approval process which is almost entirely about passing the building code and the fire code. The use is prohibited in the Gateway Business District, as I believe the room rental home now is. And the special permit is required in the medical and professional district. An administrative permit, so the annual inspection is required for all short-term rentals. So we came up with an idea that we would have a administrative permit annually, which would be pretty much, John, would that be pretty much the fee of a fire?
So that would
inspection?
coincide with the fire inspection.
Right.
So
$75.
if that's,
What is the definition? I guess I'm gonna ask a question. What is that definition? Is it a fire inspection or is it a building and fire inspection?
it's a fire inspection.
It's a fire
It's a state mandated fire inspection.
No, short-term room rentals are allowed in single or two-family dwellings, and short-term home rentals are allowed in a single-family dwelling. Guest bedrooms are allowed in accessory buildings with approved sanitary facilities. So we've made that clear. And the nature of hosting would be appropriate if the host is in the front and the rental is in an accessory dwelling above the garage, for example. Other nuances in the draft I'm not including, but it's in this draft, so if you have any questions, just ask me. One other significant thing I think is that for when a rental is non-hosted, that you would require a licensed realtor to you register the name of a licensed realtor who has the right to control the premises.
Only if you leave Dutchess County, correct?
If you leave Dutchess County.
Because there is a,
If you're close, then it doesn't matter. So that's a brief summary of what we're proposing. We didn't all agree to everything. We're trying to come up with a plurality of business items, and then we created a draft off of that. So now we're presenting the draft to the village board. We need feedback from the public. We need feedback from the county and from our attorney, but this is the first step with the workshop process. So.
All right, so I'm gonna ask another question then. An auxiliary structure.
Yeah.
Could you explain that again?
Accessory building. So if you have a building on the rear of the lot, or if you have a garage with a room above it with sanitary facilities, that can be considered appropriate
As hosted,
if the
If
owner
the-
occupant is in the front.
living in the primary,
Right.
in the main building.
Yeah.
That would be hosted.
Right.
And is there a limitation on how often that can be used, the auxiliary structure?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, I'm just, for
Right.
clarity for myself, I wanted
So
to make sure.
one of the things we talked about is we're looking at inventory and trying to find out what kind of supply we have already. And we know there's a lot of accessory dwellings in the village. We know there's a lot of opportunities in the town, which is more spread out, to perhaps come up with rentals. But we have a lot of 2 units in the village also, so.
Okay, a lot of accessory units as well.
And a lot of accessory units, so if you're on the first floor, if the owner occupant lives on the first floor, then the second floor, is fair game for a hosted rental.
Mhm.
So another thing to consider is the economics are such that in the village now, it might be more feasible to, instead of buying a house and renting it out as a 2-unit, to just Airbnb it all the time. So it's one thing that we all agreed, pretty much all of us agreed, is that for completely non-owner occupied buildings, that we're not supporting that.
just can't have transient renters. You're allowed to rent the property for the entire year. You just can't have anybody who's transient thereof, right?
You can rent long-term, which is 30 days or more.
Is that long-term, 30 days
So
or more?
30 days.
Just so
It's
everyone
either
knows,
30 or 31.
the long-term rentals are not, we're not even touching that month-to-month leases or home rentals for a year or 2 years, whatever. This does not affect that at all.
And that's permitted in the code today.
Yeah,
So that
we're
doesn't
not
change.
interfering with people's right to rent their
Right.
houses.
Right, okay, so
So-
Just
that
making it
stays
clear.
the same. Okay.
So now, John can verify that a non-hosted rental in any capacity is not allowed today.
That is the current law.
Status quo.
Non-hosted rental.
It's
Well,
not permitted.
Non-hosted short-term rental.
non-hosted, that's the
Short-term
definition I was looking for.
Short-term
Because,
rental.
because you can say non-hosted, but it can be non-hosted and you can rent it out for a month or you can rent it
That's
out for a
right.
Well,
year,
yes.
and that's
Well,
fine.
I just said that,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's what I meant.
Well, the way the code's written as of right now, short-term, it's just either a B&B home or a B&B establishment. That's all we have on the records right now.
And we have lodges, which is.
Lodges,
yeah.
but we don't have anything that's
Commercial use.
short-term until we're introducing that now. So we're revamping an entire whole different structure or operation, so to speak. We still have the B&B, but now we're talking short-term rentals, which is, there's, even though they're kind of the same, but there are two different definitions for them.
Mhm.
So that's where we have to kind of make sure that we make it very clear what's what.
Yeah, the bed and breakfasts are already approved and in the code and nothing, that doesn't change.
Right. And you're not allowed to have a non-hosted B&B, whichever way you.
That's the
look at
current,
it. Right.
that's the current.
Right.
Yeah, the proposal says a non-hosted short-term room rental is restricted to 2 bedrooms. And I was wondering how John is going to enforce that. If somebody has 3 or 4 bedrooms in their house, how do you enforce that?
That's going to be kind of tough. I mean, the rental registry form is going to have to be very detailed. So when somebody comes in to fill out the registration form, they're going to supply me with all that information. If there's any reason for me to suspect otherwise, I'd have to investigate it. And I'd have to investigate it based off the information that the owner gave me,
And a lot of it's on the honor system,
pretty much.
Well, I mean, might it
Can
be
you-
better for
Yeah.
for that case,
Can you-
not even the state?
Can you
number?
explain, I would like some explanations and background of how you arrived at the limitation of bedrooms.
It's based on impacts such that you got more of a lodging activity that's affecting the character of the neighborhood.
But you have an allowability for, 6 to 10 people?
For short term, for the short-term room rental?
For short-term home rental, that's what you've got.
Short-term room rental.
Well, not,
So the short-term room rental, don't forget, it doesn't require site
Right.
plan review. So
right.
it's like this fast-track administrative permit process. So there's not as much of an approval method.
So a short-term home rental has no restriction on bedrooms,
It's 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
Yeah.
A short-term room rental
It's 1 to
is
2.
maximum of 2 bedrooms per
Right.
home. Got it.
And 6 occupants, and if it's non-hosted, I guess it'd be the same impact if those 6 people were in 3 or 4 bedrooms as 2.
Right.
So it's really the same impact.
So that's a distinction, that's a clear distinction then. I mean, good definition of the two, because in the short-term home rental, you can rent out your house if you want to, for the 40 days per year.
That is non-hosted short-term room rental. Short-term room rental has 2 flavors, hosted and non-hosted.
Right. Now, let's talk about short-term home rental first. Let's stick to the,
Short-term home rental
Just
is
like a
bed and breakfast
facility.
establishment. It's so close to the bed and breakfast establishment. Basically, you're not serving breakfast and you're not allowed to sign.
You don't get a sign.
So we've had that in the code since forever.
right.
Yeah.
but a short-term home rental is allowed to rent out their home for 40 days.
No.
No.
It's very
I'm
confusing
confused.
Up to 40
because,
days per annum.
See, this is what?
Up to 40 days per annum.
Per annum.
Yeah.
Right, for a short-term home rental.
Non-hosted.
Room rental.
it-
Room rental.
We're talking about, he's
you
asking
know,
about home.
if short-term home rental wasn't there altogether, it'd be a lot easier because we could just say bed and breakfast facility. That's really the bed and breakfast facility. Short-term room rental is both hosted and non-hosted, limited to 6 occupants. When you want to go beyond 6 occupants, Brett's thinking is that's a new classification, which is what you have with a bed and breakfast facility. It's a new distinction for not having a sign and not serving breakfast.
But the non-hosted limit is 40 days per year.
For a
And
home,
short-term
too.
home rental is
For a home,
never
too.
For a home.
non-hosted.
That's, but.
The
for a
short-term
home-
home rental, you can do it all the time if you're hosted.
The short-term room rental,
The short-term home
home rental, right. You got it? I don't think it's clear.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody has this. That's why.
I think I can explain
That's why it took so long. That's why this is a presentation to the board. Okay? Because we need to understand it as well. Yes, go ahead.
I seriously think if you would just strike out short-term home rental from your mind right now, that'll make it much easier to understand. It is I'm not really sure why it was introduced as a new class, because we could have just said, you know, a bed and breakfast establishment, you cannot serve breakfast if you don't want to. And a bed and breakfast establishment could just elect not to serve breakfast. This new one, if we just put it out of mind right now and just stick with short-term room rental, because it is both unhosted.
Hosted and hosted.
Yes, but when you say unhosted short-term room rental, it does mean unhosted entire home rental. So the vocabulary kind of gets us confused, but if you'll forget about this one, I think we can. Unhosted short-term room rental is unhosted entire home rental.
Do you agree with that definition?
Yeah, up to 40 days per year. So
Up to 40 days per
You
year.
go in and you say, all right, someone has a single family with an accessory dwelling above their garage. Okay, so they say, I'll always be there when I rent it. So that's considered a short-term room rental, and you have to go in and get an administrative permit annually, and the inspection and all that. So if you have the same thing, but you're not going to be there, so you don't have an accessory dwelling, then for 40 days of the year, that's considered a non-hosted short-term room rental.
Room rental.
Yeah.
Got it. And that.
Same
that-
structure.
And then that has the limitation of 1 to 2 bedrooms.
They both do.
Which the limitation on 6 occupants is the impact. How many bedrooms are used doesn't change the impact. It's the occupants that's the impact.
Okay. So I want to make sure, before we, hold on one, can you hold on 1 second? Because I just want to make, because this is the presentation to the board, and I promise I will get to all of you, right? So, because we need to be, the board has to be at a level as well of understanding. Because I'm looking at the board and I'm seeing,
You're saying room, but it doesn't mean room, it means a home, so this is a little confusing, so.
so, this is important so just bear with us till we can hash this out and figure out the exact definition. And I appreciate your patience.
Could we,
We're really adding hardly anything. A room rental home,
No, but,
the room rental home is in the code right now, okay? The dwelling having a registered resident host in the primary dwelling is private single-family or two-family home, in which at least 1 and not more than 2 rooms are provided for overnight accommodation.
can you just call out the section of the code so I can follow along when you call that
This
out?
is a definition section in
Yeah.
section 120-64
it's what we printed out here.
for room rental home.
you get a copy?
No, he's asking about the code itself.
Oh, the code,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
2064.
short-term room rental replaces that definition, encompasses that definition, but allows for non-hosted rentals of 40 days per annum or less.
Okay.
So that's the idea. That's what the plurality of the committee agreed to.
All right, I think I got it. I mean,
Well, so when you're saying non-hosted, are you saying a separate apartment in a home where somebody lives in the rest of the
No,
home?
that's what I was saying. If you have a 2-unit, the host could be on a different floor. If you have a 1-unit with an accessory dwelling, the host can be in the front building.
Right, but you're saying 40 days, so who's going to rent out a non-hosted unit for only 40 days a year?
It's every weekend, pretty much, between Mother's Day and Labor Day.
So who's going to keep,
That's the big enchilada.
that's, if you want to talk about what an Airbnb is, it's that they could do weekends up to 40 days per annum. But the limitation is 1 to 2 bedrooms.
but that's not even a whole, that can't be a whole year then.
No, it's not.
So
That's the
who's going to
short-
keep,
that's the
who's
short term.
going to monitor this?
There's
It's a
a,
complication, but we're trying to,
the
we're trying to
operator,
come up with something that satisfies the bed and breakfast
So it's
community.
only about half a year you can rent out this space
40.
for a weekend, for weekends, probably for a half a year.
You mean the market, because people don't rent in the winter?
No, I'm just saying that's the limitation. You can only rent it out for a weekend for maybe half a year. I don't care if it's,
For 40 nights,
20
40
weekends,
day, 40.
40
nights.
days, yeah.
40 nights.
20
Right.
40
weekends.
nights.
20 weeks a year, 20 weekends a year.
Right, that's half a year about.
No.
What,
If you,
Close.
28.
Yeah, I guess how you look at it,
Two-fifths of the
yes.
year,
right?
that's how you look at it, yes.
50 seconds.
It doesn't have to be weekends, though. It could be a Monday, Tuesday, for all I care. It doesn't have to be Saturday, Sunday.
There's 52 weeks in a year, right? So you're saying 20 weekends, so that's almost half a year.
Oh,
That's
if-
that's the way I'm looking at
If
it.
you're thinking about a weekend, but what if you did it, can you do?
Well, that's the only,
Good
Yeah.
segue. Can you do Monday, Tuesday to person trustee Rossi, and then do Wednesday, Thursday to trustee Lewitt, and still comply?
That's
And
4
it's-
nights.
And that's the 4 nights, just, that's
yeah,
my
but as
thing.
long as it's not more than 40 days a year.
Correct,
40 nights.
40 nights,
40 nights, okay, you're
Yeah.
talking nights, I'm talking days.
Yeah.
41 days.
yeah.
Okay.
You confused me on the half a year thing.
Well, the big thing here is to rent on weekends, right? Airbnb
That's what
people.
But we're,
Yeah.
but we're
So-
trying to be flexible and make sure that we understand the definition.
This isn't,
Right.
yeah.
I apologize, I'm definitely not as grasping this as my fellow trustees. And I would like to be able to separate, as you suggested, Dennis, don't think about short-term home rentals. But if I own a home, I can do untethered, unlimited, short-term rentals, is that correct?
No.
There's 2 cases. You have a home, and let's say you don't have if you have an accessory building, and you are in your home, you may rent that. That is hosted. The only time you're non-hosted is you've left the property.
I may have misunderstood, but I thought you said that short-term home rentals can be hosted or unhosted.
No, and I wish we would stop talking about short-term home rental because it's really bed and breakfast establishment.
It's just like
So
what we have on the books for the last 40 years,
Yeah.
a bed and breakfast establishment, except you
Yeah.
can't have a sign.
It gets confusing
And
because
you
it's a
don't
home
serve
rental.
breakfast. so.
I'm not trying to badger anybody.
So
I'm
it's
just trying to-
short-term
I'm just trying to
room rental.
understand it.
John, so you have to live there no matter what. You can go away and rent your place while you're away for only 40 days or 40 nights.
Up
So
to
You
6
still-
people.
You still have to physically live there 260 days out of the year. So that's your primary residence. But when you decide to go to Florida in the winter, you're not gonna be able to rent it because nobody wants it in the winter. But all I'm saying is
Right, yeah.
you'll have that opportunity to not physically be there. You can be somewhere else and then you can rent it out. That's
So
it.
The limitation of the 40 days, or the parameter of the 40 days as a limitation, is applicable to a short-term home as well as a short-term room. Is that correct? Uh-oh.
So try not to mix those two. So you gotta just, so the foundation is you always live there, no matter what, okay? And now, the way your house is set up, if you have a room, then you're a short-term rental room. If you have a separate dwelling unit, which is an accessory, You're still the
Okay.
owner of the land, and that's your primary, but now this dwelling unit in the back is gonna be dedicated just for that customer.
I think I understand a little bit better.
That's hosted because you're on the property.
You're
It's
hosted.
hosted when you're on the property,
Right.
it's unhosted when you're not on the property.
And I can only be unhosted 40 days a year?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
and you have to have the permit to do that.
Or you have to at least live there 260 days.
Yeah.
It's- I think that's the primary thing. If you could rent it, you know, I think the max is 40 nights, and so the task was, how do you record and keep that on the honor system?
Now you know why it took the committee so long, okay?
Well, it's,
Just
Yeah,
to put clarity on it.
it's complicated. I mean, any
It is,
code, you go over any
this
code.
is complicated
and-
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's hard to explain.
And it's
code.
important, so we want to make sure we understand, and then we want to make sure everybody here as well has the same understanding.
Now, if you want to rent over 2 bedrooms, then it morphs into the short-term home rental. So that requires site plan review because it's got a greater impact.
And you
More
can still,
occupants.
but you can be unhosted with that site plan, go through
And
that
you're
site plan.
always hosted,
You're always hosted,
always hosted.
right, so it becomes a bed and breakfast, basically.
Yeah, it's a lot like a
But
bed
you
and
don't,
breakfast.
but you don't, yes, it becomes a lot like a bed and breakfast.
So then it becomes more of an impact to the community. You want the owners to be there, you know, you want to hold them accountable in case something happens. There have been some cases where people would have weddings, and, you know, it became a pretty big impact to the community. So now, we're trying to eliminate all that by having that person always there, being held accountable. If something happens, the police get called, they get called, what have you, so.
Would it be, would it be a little bit easier to say that that the law is really split up for 2 conditions? If you have 2 or less bedrooms available, there's one set of rules. If you have 3 to 5 bedrooms available, there's another set of rules. Is that an easy way to say without getting into the home room situation? Is that
Yes.
is that a way to think about it? If I got 1 to 2, I have one set of rules. 3 to 5, I have a different set of rules.
But for the 1 to 2, if it's not hosted, it's a subset of rules.
Okay,
Right.
Yeah.
okay.
So
So that, okay.
40 days a year, max.
So I want to get back to my original question,
Okay.
the 2-bedroom limitation.
Yeah.
And you started by defining that's based on an impact statement, a residential impact
That's in
statement.
the code right now for room rental homes.
For room
We
rental
haven't-
homes.
We haven't changed that.
And the
A lot,
impact,
so a lot of times I don't want to change things because it's already been vetted. We passed the code 8 months ago and why start over, you know what I mean?
Well, we're looking at this code, so it's, you can open things up if we have to,
We have to.
right?
the impact, I think, is based upon occupants, so I was never clear why non-hosted, nor do I understand how it's enforced, because, you know, you put 6 people in a house, I don't know how John knows which bedrooms they go into.
Exactly.
Well,
And I don't know how you put 6 people in 2 bedrooms sometimes.
So, I mean,
So let's not debate amongst ourselves, I mean,
the enforcement aspect of it would be this. A neighbor complains about another neighbor having too many occupants in the house. Based off of that complaint, gives me probable cause. So at that point, I usually will investigate the situation. If I can't get in that particular time, then a letter would go out to the owner asking for an on-site inspection. If it's refused, then I basically address the court, talk to the judge, he gives you a search warrant, and then you proceed that way. So that's the enforcement end of it. That's how I'm able to get into somebody's house without them really allowing me in. And it's based off a probable cause. So, you know, whoever makes that complaint is gonna make it a formal complaint, because that person may even be brought into court to testify and so on. So that's the enforcement end of it.
and right now, the limitation on a room rental home is 4 adults? 4 adult occupants as lodgers. Now we changed it to 6 people.
Yeah, and, you know, just, you know, like I say, this was, sometimes people were for things, sometimes they were against it, and it was majority but, you know, I propose that the code should be silent on the number of bedrooms when it's non-hosted, just because John doesn't know. You limit it to 6 people, so you limit it to the impact. You know, that's clear that that should be done. That makes sense. You didn't have to go through a site plan review. But it could just be silent on how many bedrooms you use, you know, because it's not enforceable. And it actually has a negative impact to the short-term rental community.
So for everybody here, what we're discussing right now is the definitions on the first page. So if you guys are satisfied with kind of understanding the definition, I would like to open it up to the floor. Are you guys okay to open the definition?
Sure.
So I want to go with definitions, all right? So yes, Donna, come on up, please. Rules are,
Name,
do
name.
the
and,
workshop,
Name and address.
I just
name,
have-
we,
Pat Strong, 11 Chestnut Street, Rhinebeck. I just have a question here about under 120-17 on the front page, B. I don't know what they're referring to with a registered licensed real estate agent. What is that saying?
So we looked up the definition of managing property management activities that require a real estate license in New York State, and leasing and collecting money and things like that. Technically, you're required to have a real estate license.
So, and this is for the short-term room rentals, it says. So if you are not there, you're not supervising, then you have to get a registered.
If you leave the county.
You have to get.
We just
a real
came up, we had to
estate
come up with some radius,
if you leave the
some
county.
sensible radius, so we just figured, okay, Dutchess County.
What if someone owns a full house, never lives there,
A what house?
an entire home,
Yeah.
but never lives there? How are they able to rent it out except a yearly lease? What's available or what's not available?
What do you mean? You could lease it month to month, or, I mean, you mean under, I'm not sure.
Under any of the circumstances here, if you never live there and you choose to rent it out.
For Airbnb
rooms-
purposes?
Rooms or the entire
You can't.
house.
You can't do that.
Because you're not a resident of
Right.
the village,
Well,
and it's not owner
That's
occupied.
what I want to
The
clarify.
owner occupancy requirement would eliminate that.
Okay, so if you own a house and you never lived there, not even 2 days out of the year, you're saying that it cannot be done according to how these new terms
That's
stand.
correct.
That's correct. If you live there 259 days out of the year, you're not allowed to do it.
Okay.
Got to be there that extra day before you qualify.
Right. Well, I think that's the problem with a lot of houses in the village. The owner is never there, and that has to be addressed. And aside from that, if, John, you find out that somebody is doing the wrong thing and you bring it to the courts, what do? It just becomes a financial fine? What makes them stop it?
Well, then the judge will probably order a cease and desist. So if the person decides to continue, then the fines just become increasingly higher.
And
So
what's-
it's more of a financial deterrent. I mean, in the penalty section, it says 15 days in jail. I doubt the judge would do that, but that is an option. But it would be, so there's the first offense, which is a fine, a certain fine, then the second offense is double, third offense is triple.
So if they flat out refuse to stop and they don't pay the fines, does that mean the village has to go to court and pay big court fees?
No, we will accumulate all those fines, and then it will be levied onto their taxes. And there'll be, and at some point, if it continues, the judge may order a bench warrant. So if the person gets pulled over, or what have you, there'll be a bench warrant out.
Okay.
So, I mean,
It's a
there are
criminal-
definitely,
It's a criminal
Yeah, it's-
process.
there's-
It's a criminal charge.
there's teeth in the code. I
Okay,
mean,
well,
yeah.
that's because there hasn't been up till now.
Right, and it's been this is a subject that's been undefined for the longest time, and the Airbnb kind of threw a wrench in the works because that was very hard to really pin down, so, I think
Well,
we still
thank
have
you.
quite a ways to go,
I
but,
thank you, you answered my questions.
yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
speak?
Yes, come on up.
Hi, Donna Warner, resident of the village. Thank you very much for all the work you've done. This is really significant. I know how long and hard you've all worked. And I do want to say, my question was pretty much the same as Pam's, but it seemed very clear that all of these short-term rentals can only be done by owner-occupied residents. Because it says, where owner occupancy is required and the lot and dwelling unit must be the owner's legal home, where the owner resides on a permanent basis for at least 240 days a year. Crystal clear, right? Have I got it right?
Well, yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
No?
Yes, you've got it right.
Huh?
You've got
I
it
just
right.
read
The
it.
short-term home rental still says what, registered resident host, but that's always been that way. So,
Yeah, I mean,
But it
short-term
still
room rental,
says
you have to be
owner-occupied.
a resident.
Short-term
No.
room rental is a owner-occupied.
They both say owner occupied.
Yeah, they do.
To begin with, the first definition of both.
Of short-term
Home
home
and,
rental?
all both categories say owner occupied.
Where does it say owner-occupied?
I believe.
Short-term home rental.
Right there,
Excuse me.
owner occupied.
Okay, okay.
It does.
Yeah,
Right, okay, you're
you
good.
have to be the owner.
Yes, exactly. You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to be, and the owner is defined in the back of your,
Yes.
as a legal resident who lives there at least.
Yes, we definitely belabored this
Yes.
point.
Yes, so it.
Yes,
I
we
just-
understand that it has to be owner occupied.
Thank you.
Clear, period.
Period.
Owner
Okay,
occupied.
clear.
Yeah.
And the point was, that was never in the, non-owner occupied was not in the code.
Right.
It says,
Right.
bed and breakfast establishment, it's still in the code.
Bed and
It
breakfast.
says a registered resident host. So that's our archaic language, we're not
Yeah,
tampering with that, whatever.
bed and breakfasts have a host.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Unhosted have not been in the code before. That's
So everybody, it has to be owner occupied, okay?
Yeah.
So we're clear?
Okay. The second recommendation I would make, I think the issues that will come about over time are going to be with respect to the short-term rental rooms, the second category of unhosted. This is sort of the heart of the matter in terms of the unhosted, because, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, I mean, as John pointed out, the burden of supervision resides on your neighbors. And I think as a neighbor, I don't want that responsibility. That's the problem with the unhosted, and as you described it. And elsewhere in your code, you recognize, geez, I can't, got too many pieces of paper. Down under 12017B, you say in the code, except, and again, except for non-hosted short-term rentals, a registered resident host of the property shall live on the site throughout the visitor's stay and supervise guests so as not to disrupt the neighborhood. So my question is, why wouldn't that also apply to short-term room rentals? In
Well,
other
it
words,
does.
to be.
It does if it's hosted, and if it's
No, I know,
non-hosted, it
so
doesn't.
I'm still coming back to the second category of unhosted. I mean, to be logical, if there's a potential disruption to neighborhoods or neighbors, why wouldn't they all be hosted? So, in some way, the other point I just want to make is, I'm almost forgetting it. I think the last question I have is, have you given any consideration to, I don't even know if you can do this in the code, to establishing a limit on how many room rentals or B&Bs could in fact be established in a particular district or
So-
or neighborhood or block?
We talked about that a lot.
Yeah,
And we
okay.
thought, wow, maybe it'd be so hard to fairly allocate what blocks get what, and, you know, what's the number and all that stuff. And we thought maybe limiting that based on the evenings per year that you could, might be a better way of doing it. But
Well, I think the issue really is I'm sorry, I'm about to make a commentary. It's about knocking out one of your neighbors. It's about the physicality of a B&B or a rental in your neighborhood. It's not about the number of nights. It's about whether or not you have an intact neighborhood. You know, and, or, you know, is 4 too many on Livingston Street? Is 6 too many? What if they're all in the same block? I do think that has to be revisited in some way. Because we can't predict the future, or to look at this as a provisional code that you revisit in a couple of years or something, but to leave this with no closure in terms of how many, how often, how much, I think deserves some more consideration.
We thought that, and even amongst ourselves, I think this 40 nights is going to be an issue that we're all going to wrestle with.
I respectfully disagree. So, and
That's why we're having a
Yes.
discussion.
So-
This is a code discussion.
right, and the only other, last point, because I'm taking too much time, is Kevin keeps, Mr. Curry is referring to 6 people in the unhosted short-term rentals. The code says 4 adults and 6 total bodies.
Yeah,
So
6
I
people.
think that's very, more specific than trying to make it vaguer, because at least it becomes observable or in some way enforceable. 4 adults is different than sort of whatever, 6 bodies. And the 2 bedrooms, again, the more specific it is, I think the better it's able to be supervised or enforced. Thank you. Thank you all for the work.
Thank you.
Yes, come forward, please.
Tom Darby. So I have a unit at the Glen, which is like a small group of condos. There's like 6 condos on Asher Road. And I live in Milan, Round Lake Road, but I own that condo, and my son lives there. So he doesn't pay us rent, or enough rent, if you will, or we have arrangements of him living there. But in order for us to really afford to keep that place and to have it viable, we get some extra income by doing short-term rental. But I don't know if that then meets the definition of owner-occupied. We'll stay there, and once in a while we'll stay there, if we want to stay into town, because it's walkable to town. So, but we don't live there full-time. He does, and so he's a member of my family, but I don't know if that meets the definition of owner-occupied.
Is he there when it's rented?
No, so
Yeah. So he
he gets kicked out.
Is he there
When,
260, is he there 260 days a year?
Oh, easily, yeah.
But he's
Yeah,
not
we,
the owner.
the number of rental days is, I think it was 23 or something last year, that we rented it, 6, 7 weekends or whatever it came out to be.
It's a good question. I
Brett,
mean,
would
Yeah,
that,
it's a
would
tough
that,
question.
Brent,
It's a
would that
very-
be legal? Because is his son an owner?
Is he a trustee?
Well,
of
he,
it?
Would it be legal?
he doesn't own it. I mean, well, actually, you know what it is? Because the unit, we put the unit into a LLC, right? So he's a partner
Oh, well.
in the
He's
LLC.
not a member. He has to be a member.
Well, you are a member.
You're not a member unless you've got a member certificate, which,
What do you mean a member?
So
well, in
LLC's
LLC, there's members in either.
No, it's a partner, it's a
I
partnership.
would,
What, LLC or a partnership?
Well,
See,
it's
the
an
thing is
LLC,
this-
so, okay, so LLC, you call it members instead of
It's
partners?
members,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, whatever, he's listed as a, owner or a member, he's listed as a
I
member
would
of
say
the
that you
LLC.
would qualify and you would fall within the compliance of the way the code's written.
Okay, because, I just thinking about that now, because it is an LLC and he is actually in that LLC.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
He's
he would
part
be-
owner of it, right? And he's there 260 days.
Yeah,
And as long as you don't rent it out more than 40 nights, then,
okay,
yeah.
good, thanks.
That's a nuanced question.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Gwen Barden. I live on South Parsonage Street. And about a year and a half ago, maybe even 2, I can't remember, I did start renting my house out. Some weekends, sheep and wool here and there. Not even 40 nights a year, but definitely way below that. The only thing is, I have a very small house. It's 975 square feet. There certainly could never be big parties, and I usually only have maybe a couple stay there, sometimes 3 or 4, just because the house does not warrant that. Although it's only 975 square feet, I have 1 bedroom that has a queen and 2 small bedrooms that have a twin, which makes it 3 bedrooms. So the thing is, that according to the new code, what I'm seeing is if a house is 2,500 square feet and 2 large bedrooms and could house many, many people, that would be okay. But this small little house would not be code, according to this. So that would put me out of business, even though I've been compliant in everything else that's there. I would be compliant except for that little area. So I'm just wondering if beds would be a consideration, or the size of a house, because that's certainly, if we're talking about restriction, I mean, and quantity of people, I mean, to me, I mean, a house that's as small as mine certainly can't house a lot of people. I mean, they're not going to have a party in my house. Sometimes someone will come and visit around a holiday, and they will go elsewhere and celebrate with family members, just because my house could not warrant having a dinner party, even. So I just would like you to consider that as well. That's, you know, an important consideration, as the size of the house, the size of the bedrooms, how many beds, as opposed to 1 or 2 bedrooms, because you could have a huge, you know, 3 sets of bunk beds in 1 bedroom if it's a large house.
I think that part of the code is up for discussion, right?
Okay, so thank you very much.
But you didn't have, to answer, I mean, not to answer a question, but further clarification, you don't make that distinction. It's bedrooms.
It's bedrooms, and it is bedrooms now. So
Right.
we just replaced short-term room rentals with room rental.
Right.
What was it? There's a category now that says 1 to 2 bedrooms.
That's short-term
Room rental home, I think.
Well, short-term room rental.
Room rental home
Oh, the current one is
is
room
1 to
rental.
2, so we didn't change that in effect.
Yeah, but when you go to the entire house, you know, there's still the problem, like Gwen has, you know, she's got 3 bedrooms, and can she rent her house now because she has 3 bedrooms, right? It's not a 2-bedroom. She's saying, gosh, she's okay with 6 people being the occupancy limit, but should there be something about, you know, she can't use 3 bedrooms? You know, that doesn't, you know, 6 sounds right, but bedroom limitation, maybe it could just be dropped out. I mean, we're talking about the definition, it'd be pretty easy just to put, but, you know, for non-hosted, the occupancy is 6. You know, and
Well, now,
you don't worry
it's
about the
4
bedrooms.
adults now, right?
4 adults, well, yeah, 4 adults, 2 children. I hope they're not adult children, but.
That's gonna be, yeah, we'll have to fine tune that.
Hi, thank you all for continuing this discussion. My name's Barbara Ballinger. I've lived here almost for 8 years on Mill Street. I started probably about 3 years ago. I am paying the Dutchess County occupancy tax. I fill out the forms, which Kevin had told us to do, you know, add up the nights and pay I guess it's 5% of what we total. I'm definitely way under the 40 days. My point is, that my house is a little bit larger than Gwen's. I have 4 bedrooms, and I can accommodate, because of the beds, I can accommodate 7 people comfortably. I don't. I set a maximum of 6 because of the contents in my house. I have lovely furnishings. I love children. I have 2 daughters and I have 2 grandsons. I don't allow children. So one of the points that I'd like to make is I'd like there to be allowed 6 adults if people want. And in my house, it's 6 adults and no children. Don't allow pets. I do a very thorough, I mean, this is up to each person and sort of a code of honor. I do an incredible job of vetting the people. When I get an email, I ask why they're coming.
So Barbara, can I interrupt a second?
Yes.
We get that.
Okay.
I really want, I'm
Okay,
sorry, I
so
want it
it's
to be
6.
limited to
Okay, so it's
to such
6.
as code. I
So
understand,
the question
everybody does a great job, but
Okay.
get to the.
Okay, so, but I just want to say that I limit it to 6, you can't have more, and I make them tell me in writing also, of course I can't hold it, that there aren't going to be any kind of parties. So I feel I'm protecting my little block.
So you want 6 total occupants?
6 total, if it's,
And be silent about adult or
Exactly.
child?
Right, your question is
Right.
restrains the bedrooms.
I would like
Okay.
to say something.
okay.
And I'm going to suggest this to the committee. What happens is when somebody opens up a restaurant, I go out there and I measure out the square footage. And then I give that particular restaurant an occupant load. You're allowed X amount of people. You know, that might be something worth doing in this situation where the applicant fills out the registration form. We're going to have to do an on-site inspection, make sure that you have fire extinguishers, fire exits, the whole works. While we're there, we're going to give you an occupant load. We're going to look at what you basically have set up for the public. And we're just going to, I can measure out a room and I can tell you how many people could, you know, there's actually a section of the property maintenance code that says that a bedroom 10 by 10 is only allowed 2 people, period. Not adults, kids, just 2 people. So it's probably best that the occupancy gets established at their registration, and then what happens is that person's registration is going to be on file. Now, if somebody calls and complains that it's loud noise, now we have a meter to find out that it is too loud. And then the other thing is, it's going to say that this occupancy is allowed 8 people. If there's 12 people in there, that person's violating their registration. The thing is, that registration can get revoked. It gets revoked, you're not operating a B&B or whatever you want to call it after that issue, or what have you. I don't know if there's a limit or what have you. So that person violates that section of the code that we're going to establish, they lose the registration of having a B&B, period. So, I mean, that's something that we should entertain.
Yeah, so that, it just brings up another part of the, and I forget where I read it, it has to do with parking. Because the current code talks about, the way the current code is no front street parking. No on-street parking, or in front of the front plane of the house. So if you define that occupancy code and it's 8, and it's 8 adults, and 8 adults show up with 8 cars, then how would that be handled?
So, talking to the planning board, and I'll have to double check, but there's a provision that says you're not allowed to be parking in the front plane of the property unless it's in the driveway.
Yes.
So now you have, right, so the thing is, some driveways are a lot bigger than others. With respect to number of cars, I don't think, you know, if I have to start counting cars and rooms and all that, that's, it's just gonna be a
That's
task.
why I'm asking questions. I mean, I know family homes that have 10 cars parked in front of it, because that's the size of their family.
Exactly, right.
And they're on the street, they're off the street, I mean, so.
The main thing is.
Today, even within the village today, that doesn't comply.
Right. And so the planning board's struggling with that right now. You know, they're at the point where new site plans come in front of the board, and they try to design a lot of these driveways where they would actually circulate, you know, they'll go to the back of the property, if they have the room. With these pre-existing houses, it's tough to really enforce that when you already have pre-established conditions.
So that's again gets back to enforcement, because how can you enforce it for somebody who is registering their place and versus a homeowner who lives there full time
We've always done that, though.
and who's always done it?
We've always done it that way.
So,
That's the way
So
it's done.
now we have bed and breakfast establishment, 2 for owner residents, plus 1 per guest room.
So Gary, when the applicant is required to go in front of the planning board for a site plan, the planning board is going to take in consideration that provision of the parking. And so they're going to look at the site and say, okay, you want X amount of people, the parking cannot be in front plane of the house, you're gonna have to extend your property to comply with the site plan. And so those are the items that will have to be.
That's new, I'm talking about pre-existing.
Oh, yeah, pre-existing,
That's
so it's a
pre-existing.
pre-existing, non-conforming use, and as long as you don't increase the non-conformity, you're allowed to operate as is. That's how that works. So if you have a pre-existing driveway, and you have 2 rooms, and all the cars are in the front of the plane of the house, so be it, as long as you don't increase the nonconformity by adding an extra room, adding another car, now it's on the lawn. You know, as long as you don't increase and become more of an impact, you can operate as is. That's how the zoning code's been always enforced. So as long as you don't increase the nonconformity, you're okay.
Does that, but that's not how I read the definition here.
Well, there's specific definitions about bed and breakfast establishment and room rental home right now.
Yeah, but that's,
So,
yeah.
but when you take a house through a planning board, you do show a design that will accommodate
I understand new
parking
homes.
that doesn't move forward.
I got that. And
Right.
if somebody makes a revision or whatever, and they go through the site plan, I got that.
As practice, yes, some people park
I
their
got
cars in
that.
front. Yeah.
I'm talking about pre-existing conditions. And that's I'm,
Okay, Did I understand you to say that if, when somebody comes to get their permit from you, and let's say it happened to be a 2-bedroom hosted, there's a parking chart that says you gotta have 2 for the owners, and you have to have 1 for each bedroom, so you have to have 4 parking places. But since it's pre-existing, those 4 places, so long as they're in the driveway, could be in the front plane, because it's pre-existing. But if it was a new, of course, I don't know why you'd be doing a new home and getting that permit at the same time, but if you were doing a new home, they would have to be in the back.
If you can't comply with the regulations, you would have to go for a variance.
right.
So what would happen is during the initial inspection and establishing the use, it may come up to where they have no parking. And so say they have enough rooms, but not enough parking, they'll be denied
Can it be in the front plane of the house?
if there's no other area to park.
It
And-
could be.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
because, but as long as you don't increase the nonconformity. So, for instance, you have a tiny little driveway, and it fits 2 cars, but you're actually able to host,
6 people.
right?
Well, that's not the limitation, say
Right.
it's 6.
So what's gonna happen is, that person will be denied a permit to operate until they get a variance for relief of the parking. That's how
So-
zoning works.
So they
Which
would have to
be
build,
unlikely to get, right?
what,
Because.
yeah, right.
It's,
What if they don't have a lot of room? Then
So
they
what happens-
can't build a bigger driveway.
so the ZBA is gonna look at the application and say, okay, this person has a driveway that they're stuck with, they didn't, you know, it's not really their fault, they purchased the property this way. So it's not a self-created hardship. It's not a hardship where they decided to scale down their driveway and they're the ones that created the problem. The ZBA is gonna take in consideration that it's a pre-existing situation. They've been, and, they may say, no, okay, you're not gonna have 6 people. You'll have 4 people, we'll allow you that. And that's gonna go on their application, that they're allowed 4 people, not 6. That's why I highly recommend going the occupancy, because it's just a lot easier to enforce that way,
So if I understand properly, what you're saying is that upon inspection, if we go the occupancy route, you would create a number on the permit, or potentially, I guess, because they still have to go forward, that would be the maximum allowable based upon the square footage of or the size of the house, something. The other part of that, or the other leg of that, is that there might be a maximum imposed by the number of parking spaces that they have available. So
It has to coincide with each other.
Right.
That's required.
So I could occupy 6 people, but I have no parking, then I might not receive a.
So you have the option of reducing your occupancy or trying to keep your occupancy and go to get a relief for parking through the CBA.
So, okay, so basically it sounds like the 2 checks or the 2 analysis for what the carrying capacity of a dwelling would be size and the availability of parking. That's the controlling factors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And we already have in the New York State ICC Property Maintenance Code, there's a formula that shows you exactly how many occupants you're supposed to have. So it's not something we're creating out of the air,
Right.
it's already established.
But weekend occupants are different than family occupants, however families are constituted. You know, if you have,
That's the question I was gonna
on the
ask.
weekends, you can have 8 adults and there's four couples.
Yeah, if you're
and
there for 2 days,
The building, you know,
It's party time, you know.
as crazy as it sounds, the building code does not really apply to, and I'm talking property maintenance other than, you know, visual stuff, but inside, if you're a family, we don't really, you know, actually, there's an overcrowded provision where if a family lives in there and there's 20 of them, I can actually.
God bless them.
No, but the code states that that's a violation. So I would have to get a search warrant, count how many people live here, how many rooms there are, and if they exceed that amount, they're really in violation. I don't know what the judge is gonna do, you know, I mean, but it is actually a violation, so who knows?
It's
Yeah.
a question about parking.
wait, can we wait 1 second? You guys on board with this? I just want to make sure the board's clarity so we can understand the question, so I apologize just for a second. You guys,
This is going to be to be continued. because-
right, this
Yeah.
is- yeah, just,
Yeah.
but I mean, I want to make sure there's no questions from the board yet.
I have a question for Kevin and for Brand. We've heard from 5 members of the community, the last 3 were family homeowners who are concerned about how the new code could impact them. John's recommendation about, well, maybe we leverage occupancy the way we do with commercial buildings. Kevin, Brand, would that solve what we heard here tonight?
I'm not crazy about that principle, frankly.
So this is really to take input
Yeah.
and not to resolve tonight, because
But-
that's why we're having what's called a workshop.
I just want to know, I thought John was working us on a trajectory to maybe resolving
He
this.
proposed a suggestion
But
that has to be vetted out.
Okay.
It might end
Okay.
up being something like, I mean, I don't think the operators, and somebody can jump on me if I'm wrong, I don't think the operators are looking to have 10 people. You know, that's clearly a site plan. So even if you had a huge house and it worked out in the code that you could have
But
10
they could.
people.
Good.
They could.
That's,
You're not, they could have more than 10 if we don't put a limitation.
oh, no, that's what I was
Yeah.
saying. First of all, I don't think they want to.
Well, but
There's a certain
But
percentage.
I was going to say, the limitation, like if you do put a limitation of 6, I think that works for people. If they want to do more, go to a site plan. Does anybody generally rent to more than 6 people, or have you ever rented more than 6 people?
Well-
Yeah, has anybody rented to more than 6 people
yeah,
at one
but
time?
this is not the whole, I don't think that's a fair question, because not everybody's here.
I'm just saying, from the community that I know, going over 6 is
There's one
not a
location I
big
know of.
issue.
Yeah, well, that's subjective, but that's not here.
So
Oh, so you're
We have to write a
arguing for
code.
more?
What?
We have to write a code that encompasses all,
can we,
Okay,
I think she had a comment.
yeah, now, you guys ready?
Yes.
We're ready for, sorry. Please come forward I'm sorry, you have to come to the microphone.
My name is Dara Jensen. I have a loft apartment in the center of Rhinebeck that I have on Airbnb, where I lived for 5 years, and my family uses it, and we rent it occasionally. I have a question about neighborhood parking in general. If you owned a house in a neighborhood, do you have a limit on how many people you can have over on the weekends and park in the street? Are cars towed if they're parked? Like if you had a dinner party, or maybe you had a dinner party every weekend? Is there any kind of parking restriction on that?
There's no
That's a
no
question.
ordinance,
No.
Other
And
than
overnight.
Just an
Other than
overnight snow.
snow.
no.
And how about a family that had like teenagers and they all had cars and stuff? Could they park on the lawn and on the street?
Not on the lawn.
That
Not on their
was
lawns.
the condition I brought up before, because
Yeah, but
we
they
know
can,
that
they
condition
can park on the
exists.
street.
Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Other than the
But-
snow
but
ordinance, right.
Not on the street during the winter. from 12:01 a.m. to 6 a.m. from November 15th to March 30th.
Right.
And as far as long-term rentals go, is there a requirement, or are you going to require from long-term rental places that everybody requires parking?
Yes.
That's a
there was.
requirement. Because
Because they would have to go through a site plan
New ones,
review.
gotta rebuild.
not where I am.
You don't have to go through you don't have to go through zoning to
Because
rent out
the
your house.
apartment that I rent has no parking.
But you don't have to go through zoning to rent out your apartment,
Long-term,
long-term.
long-term. So you're, to
So
answer-
long-term,
That's allowed today.
to answer your
Yeah.
question, no, you don't have.
you don't have to provide parking for
Long-term
long-term.
rental.
Does not. Okay.
Yes, you're the only one raising your hand.
Okay, just want to say, when my house was redone, when I bought it, I had to go to the planning board, and I have 4 allocated parking spaces. I can't make 6 out of it, I can't, I only use 2, but I believe that's a matter of record.
For site plan approval, right?
Yeah,
So when
yeah,
you're in front of
yeah.
the board for site plan,
Uh,
this is pre-existing, your
yeah.
situation? Are you comparing the situation? The conditions, or, Donna?
What?
No, are you comparing?
No,
Oh.
I was just trying to clarify.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it seems pretty,
But,
anyway,
but your house is brand new, right? I mean, you went through a full site plan?
yeah.
Right, so I think
It's
when.
not brand new, it's
Well, right.
1860.
But the thing is, but the planning board at that point, they're gonna make sure you
They
have
made a
enough
deter-
parking.
Yeah, they made a determination
Right.
on how many I could have. No, I wanted to make a comment on some of the conversation that's going towards this idea of occupancy by square footage. I think there's a reason, and particularly under the short-term room rentals, where we're looking at burden. It's not just a question of how many people can you put in the house, it's a question of what kind of a burden or impact are you putting in the neighborhood. It's not just bodies. And I think again, I'm gonna go back to, there's always been, historically, the room rentals was limited to 2, as opposed to a B&B, 2 bedrooms, 4 adults. And I think I just want to bring it back to that, so that we're it's also a business. I mean, if we look at our home occupations and so on, they all have limitations and regulations on how many people can be there, and how many cars can be there, and so on. It really isn't just about how much can the property bear.
So with respect to the occupancy, if I was gonna do a calculation, I would only count the square footage of the actual bedrooms, not the living room with a pull-out couch, that doesn't qualify. So if there's 2 bedrooms and one's very tiny, it's gonna probably fit only 1 occupant, and if the other one's big enough to hold 2, then you're talking 3 people tops.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't calculate the kitchen, I wouldn't calculate the living room and what have you.
I'm just trying to say, let's stand on the code the way it's written.
Right, no,
Which is
okay.
2 rooms, 2 bedrooms,
Yeah.
4 adults. And I'm not in favor of moving towards some other calculation which would increase the burden.
Yeah.
That's all.
It's probably gonna be close anyway, it would be, one less thing I have to worry about.
Would it be possible to back up to, it's Mr. Darby, right? And I wanted to go back to his, and it's because I want to make sure you don't have a problem, okay? An LLC, your son, unless he's a member, he's not an owner. The way to handle a situation like this might be, he was in operation in December of 2016. You had a reasonable expectation that you were operating legally. I don't think you thought you were breaking any ordinances, did you? Okay. So should somebody like that be grandfathered? I mean, because otherwise, unless your son is a member, he is not an owner.
I consider him compliant. Regardless if, I mean, your son basically is listed on, is your son eventually gonna get the property if that's the case? I mean, you know, if.
I have to ask his brothers and sisters.
But he is listed as some type of agent in that
Yeah, he's,
LLC.
I'm gonna have to review it, but I put, he's in the LLC. He's
He can be a
member. I
manager.
guess
There
it's
is
I thought it was partner,
absolutely,
but member, I think you're right.
he can be a manager, and if a manager satisfies that, maybe the code needs to say owner occupied or, you know, owner's relative, or,
I don't, actually, I'm gonna disagree with that. I think it's overly burdensome to ask somebody to join an LLC. In other words, if he has to make his son part of it, if he's not already a member, you can change the bylaws of your LLC and add them. And I don't think that's a really burdensome regulation, rather than us trying to tie ourselves in knots about who is or who isn't. You know, if you're gonna serve this up.
the code says you must be an owner, must be owner occupied. His son is not an owner. You can go to court on that, his son is not an owner.
Right, but if he's a member of the LLC, and the LLC owns it, then he's an owner.
Mr. Darby is the owner, can't
I think we're all in agreement with that.
Right.
He can rent out long-term,
He is renting out.
but the side I took was that a renter should be able to do an unhosted so long as they are a village resident. That was my side. The way it came out was you have to be owner occupied. So I really am on your side, but I'm trying to make sure that somebody doesn't come back and say, he's not an
Right,
owner,
so,
and you don't get to.
right, so if I didn't have the LLC, which I'm happy I have at this point in time, but if I didn't, if he was just renting there, and for him to be able to afford the rent or whatever, he wanted to rent it out a few times, you know, use the you know, area.
Non-hosted, entire
Right,
home rental.
non-hosted, rent it out, then, but he's a permanent, you know, but he's a resident of Rhinebeck, you know, works in town,
Yes.
lives in town.
Mr. Darby, he's
Would he be
your son
able-
and he's your tenant, is he not? Right?
Yeah,
That's a
I mean, we have
renter,
arrangements,
not an
whatever,
owner.
as far as,
But Mr.
he's
Darby is
not
the owner,
officially, I
right?
wouldn't call him an official renter.
He's not occupied.
But we're not talking of short-term rental.
Long-term, but now
But he-
his son wants to do short-term.
His son wants, it's a 4
Yeah,
I think it's a unique,
But it's-
really unique situation, and you're probably okay, because you're suggesting your son may be a member, or a managing partner.
Yeah, he is, but I think
So
we're
you're
just
okay.
talking about, it's
Not an
from my
owner.
point of view, it's more theoretical, I
It is.
suppose.
It's an owner.
But suppose he was renting, would he be able to, under what you're putting in there, if he was renting, had been renting in town for 3 years,
No.
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 When with the permission of the owner,
No.
that would be a question. That's a theoretical question, that's not really affecting me, but I suppose it's
The
something
committee,
to talk about.
or not on my side, but the committee was concerned that that would be a ruse that could be used. I own this, and now I have a renter there who really isn't a renter, who is somebody that's there as a
Right.
decoy so that I can rent it out.
Right.
But you'd be limited to 40. Doesn't sound like a great strategy to me, but.
Well, no, I think that's a point, because if I wasn't fortunate enough to have the LLC, I think you'd be telling me no,
Right.
right?
I think you would, I mean, I would speak for myself, I think
Yeah.
you would not want to have a situation where a renter is then renting to somebody else on any condition. That would have to be, you know, if that person wants to leave the apartment and have the owner rent the apartment, that's one thing, but I don't think we want to have a situation where a renter is then able to rent out the apartment additionally. I don't think you would not allow
So,
that.
for those of us that have experience with this, Rick, yes, you are correct. I've had that happen to me before.
And, you know, I just want to be real clear.
Like
Your
subletting
son
or
is
whatever.
not an owner unless he's a member, and he's
Right.
not a
We'll
member.
rubber that.
He's not an owner.
So you have to look that up.
So the code needs to be aligned with, we're telling him he's fine, but no, the code, he's not, your son is not an owner. And if somebody, yes, I do know that, because I know he's saying his son's not a member, and that means he's not an owner. It's a legal, pure fact. There's just no way around that.
No,
All right, so I think we're
he's
beating- I think
he's
we're
in the,
beating-
he's written into the LLC.
His son is on the
He's a-
LLC.
He has to look this up and then
Yeah.
resolve
No, I know,
it.
it's-
all.
I
We'll
think
find
it's
out.
That's done.
5%
No,
or
this is a
something
John
like that.
Fenton issue, by the way, I mean, yeah.
He's got, whatever it is, he's in there. Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, so.
I know that's.
I think
Offline.
we need to move off on this.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, okay.
thank you.
Right.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ryan Foote. I'm currently in the process of purchasing a home in Rhinebeck, so looking forward to meeting everyone that I haven't met, and appreciate all the efforts of the committee. I know this is a very polarizing issue both ways, so if you've noticed some increased traffic on your site or YouTube videos, it's not the Russians, it's just me taking a look at what you guys have been up to, so again, appreciate it. Couple things that I'm thinking, or questions that I had, I guess, in terms of my plan was to occasionally rent out my entire home when I'm not in town, so that would fall into way less than 40 days. However, my concern is if there's a restriction on 2 bedrooms, what am I supposed to do to restrict people from going into my 3rd bedroom? You know, I don't know, lock it, I guess. That's one question. My other question is, if I were to do a hosted room rental where I rented out one of the bedrooms and I was present on the property at the time, and I went over to Kingston to Home Depot, I'm technically leaving Dutchess County, so am I out of compliance? So, I mean, that's
You'll have
one
to
other.
register your GPS with our system.
And I guess my last comment would be, I think John's approach in terms of the number of occupants makes a lot of sense based, and it would seem to me that 2 per bedroom would be reasonable based on, you know, an assessment, you know, when the inspection takes place. So just my thoughts. Appreciate it again, guys.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rudy Younger, and I'm a licensed real estate broker. And when you say you have to have somebody like close, so like within Dutchess County to call them or something like that, I think you need to flesh that out quite a bit more, because you have a realtor, a realty, you have a broker, you have a real estate agent. So they're all different terms. So I think you need to, you know, just flesh it out a bit and get some definition around that. And also like a property manager, there's no legal registration for a property manager. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So I just think you need to do a little more work on defining what exactly that is. Okay.
So, wait, so are you suggesting that if somebody's a property manager, you don't need to be a realtor?
No, because you know what you're really looking for is someone to be able to address it. I own a company, and I get called at all kind of hours. I get called 2, 3 in the morning to resolve issues, something like that. So it's just really to be able to touch somebody in a situation if the owner's not there. So
Right, but, so if you're renting out an office building as a property manager, doesn't that require a realtor, like, to be a realtor?
no, I don't think so. A broker means you own the company. That's like Berkshire Hathaway.
You can't lease out office space without having a license.
Well, I don't know why that's relevant. All I'm telling you is you need to touch somebody.
We're leasing out spaces. I mean, that was, I'm just giving you what
Okay.
the mindset of the group
Okay.
was.
Because I think all you're looking for is if there's an issue, you need to be able to touch somebody when you can't get a hold of the
Yeah,
owner.
no,
That's all.
that part's true.
That's all. So all I'm saying is anything you need to flesh it
I
out.
just did a straight reading of the activities of a realtor, whatever that provision in the code or in the state law. And it
Okay.
seemed to me like leasing and collecting money is in an activity that requires a license.
Yes, you do. That's what I do. So, but I don't know what your purpose is of having that person. Is it just to touch somebody when the owner's out of town and they have to resolve a
We
conflict?
just don't want to coach people into practicing, you know, engaging in activities that require a real estate license when they don't.
Right, they don't. If you own your own house, you don't have to have a real estate you don't have to have a realtor or a broker or a real estate agent or someone like me to do it, you know, so you don't. You can do it yourself. I just don't know the purpose of that
That's right,
phone call.
but-
Like, what are you looking to do there? What's your purpose of having that
Primarily, it
person in
was
place?
to be able to reach out to somebody in case of an emergency.
Exactly.
A frozen pipe,
Right.
what have you. We need somebody to do.
Noise
to
complaint,
address it.
right? Noise complaint?
It can't be a
That's all.
superintendent, but he's had issues where the people he calls don't have any skin in the game, and they don't have a license that he can,
Okay.
you know, as far as enforcement activities, he doesn't have the teeth for people
Okay.
that are not really professionals anyway.
Okay. All I'm saying is just you need a little more definition around what exactly that is. Do you need a license? Who can it be? Can it be a property manager? Does it have to be a licensed person?
Yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
We can look into
honestly.
that. We should have our attorney, just look into
Yeah,
it.
that's all. And because the purpose is really to be able to contact somebody in a situation where you can't get hold of the owner. And that's totally fair. I get those calls all the time. So, all right, that's all.
Just so you know, this draft has not been reviewed yet by the attorney. It has to go to the county planning board for their feedback.
Yep. And that's all we're doing is give you some feedback, just to, tell you where you might have some areas where you need to tighten some things up a bit. So that's all. So, okay, just some feedback. All right.
I just want to remind everybody at that point, this is a workshop, and we're here to talk about the problems, we're here to address the issues, and have an open conversation, which is what we can have about this, because we are having a workshop.
Right, because I see a lot of ambiguity around this topic, that's all with what I'm
That's
bringing
right.
up, so
So-
that's all. So you need to have that discussion and really figure out what exactly you're looking to do and who should be doing it and who's licensed and everything else, so that's all.
The thing is, this entire municipality has been invaded by Airbnb. We have this use running rampant throughout the village of Rhinebeck and the town of Rhinebeck. And we're just trying to get our hands on this and try to basically, control it.
Yep.
And in the meantime, we're trying to put together all these laws that everybody can comply to. So
Right.
this is a major task.
Every town in America is going through this exact same
Yeah,
exercise, they really are.
So-
But as a licensed of a company owner, I sign 600 leases a year. If somebody's not, like a house owner constantly has those parties and the police are always there and everything else, you should have a permit system that says, next year, guess what? You're not gonna get your permit back.
Well, not only that, though, now the liability falls into the village's lap, because now we're aware of all these uses and
Yeah.
these businesses.
Right.
And if we don't establish guidelines and laws to, at least
Absolutely. yeah.
supervise it,
Yeah.
it puts ourselves in a lot of
The
danger.
homeowner who's having the home with a lot of problems, if they don't fix it, they should be shut down. I'll be the first one to tell you that, so that's all. And you have to have a
Right.
process in place to be able to do that, so.
I think you should leave us your card. No, really.
Feel free, I've done this for a long time, I know it all.
If you're local, you're local.
I am local.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because I was going to say this before, because John, what happens when we have these complaints in the middle of the night? You live in the Wappingers, they're not going to be calling you.
So normally,
2:00 in the morning.
we're actually establishing, possibly, well, we have a fire inspector. We have a fire inspector who lives local, and that, could easily segue into another whole other issue, but we do have somebody who lives in the village. If a call comes out to me, my ETA could be an hour, hour and a half. That particular person could be there within.
We also have a police department.
And we have a police department.
So there are avenues for us to do this.
And in the perfect world, you want to call someone like me, I have a chance to shut it down, I call somebody, go over there, fix the problem. If I can't, I might call the police.
Yeah, but usually what happens is, so the police will investigate it, I'll meet
Right.
with the sergeant usually the next morning,
Right.
and then I have to go back and
Right,
take
right.
a look.
Because, the people that rent, they have the parties and do all that stuff, they're the ones that give the whole business a really bad name, and it doesn't have to be
So
like that.
excuse me, we want to keep this to the code. Thank you.
I could get on a roll. Thank you.
Thanks.
This gentleman raised his hand first, sorry.
Just Doug Meyer. Some brief kind words about Airbnb. It is because of Airbnb that I found this great village. That my wife and I got married at Rhinecliff. A little choked up because this town really does mean a lot to me. We ended up buying the place that we stayed in Airbnb. We loved the house so much that we ended up buying that place in Rhinecliff.
All right, so excuse me, I've told everybody else, this is not the sales place.
Doesn't have to be.
We're here,
I've heard so
do you have a
much.
code issue?
Mhm.
All right, I really want to focus on.
I can talk to John after. I don't want to waste anyone's time.
Well, no, if you have a
Yeah.
code issue regarding what we're doing. Yeah,
I get the rules. I've read it and.
We're definitely trying to establish everything, rules and regulations that will accommodate everybody. And there's a wide variety of different uses. We have the people that run in B&Bs for the longest time, then we got the Airbnbs. We're trying to define the codes and make everybody happy, right? So.
Definitely.
But if you have, right now, if you have something that you think, could help your situation, by all means.
No, I just want to bring more good people and good families to Rhinebeck.
It's
That's my
absolutely.
intention.
Thank you.
That's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if there's going to be different rules or regulations for an Airbnb that's in the business district, like mine. I'm the only person there that has an
hasn't really-
Airbnb.
Yeah, that hasn't really changed in the village center.
I don't
we've
have
changed
any
it so
neighbors.
Non-hosted was not allowed by the prior code.
But might it be allowed in a business district where there's no
I
noise
believe it's
issues?
just gateway where it's prohibited. I think you're good, but I have to look at the chart.
Because my
Except the owner
Airbnb,
occupied.
it's for 2 people.
And you live there?
I don't.
So
I
this
use
is
it, but I don't sleep there.
Good question.
And my family uses it.
Yeah.
In the village center and residential
used to live
district,
there.
it's a administrative permit for a short-term room rental.
And you have to be a village resident. So unless there was grandfathering,
So might I be grandfathered in
So-
as somebody that spent many thousands of dollars fixing
Well,
the place up?
I mean, John can talk about grandfathering. Grandfathering is when you have a conforming use, a code passes, and it's non-conforming anymore. Uses that are just plain not legal, there's no real grandfather mechanism.
So in your particular
Zoning.
case, the way I would address it is if I can't completely identify your use in what is in front of me in the code, then it becomes something that I have to kick to the zoning board of appeals.
Mhm.
Your situation is unique and it doesn't comply with the code, so then you would be required to get a use variance. You know, use variances are very tough to get, but maybe in your particular situation, the board may approve it.
It is a weird situation.
Yeah, and
I
I don't,
mean,
I
it's
don't,
in a-
I
it's in
I
a
can't
commercial
sugarcoat it,
building.
you know, to, what you're explaining to me sounds like it's a prohibited use. You know, you've been doing it for X amount of time because
That the Airbnb part of it is prohibited, or just having it, the
having it
apartment there?
non-hosted, just, I don't think your use falls into
Less than
anything.
30 days. So the issue is, if it was greater than 30 days, it'd be in compliance, right?
Yes, yes.
If you were, so if you
Right,
can do it,
right.
but by less than 30 days, you're not in compliance. with
You
the-
need long-term rental as opposed to transient. Transient is anything less than 30 days. If that's how you've been operating, unfortunately, it's a violation. If it's over 30 days and is considered long-term rental, then you're fine.
And is there any way that you might consider giving me a variance or whatever?
That's
There
not-
is a process.
Okay,
There's a
because
Yeah.
it's the only place in town that's like that.
Well,
I mean, it's
but-
obviously no one's bothering anybody there
But we have a
because there's
process.
nobody there.
The village has a process for that.
And what would that be?
You would go to, I'll let John.
Yeah, you can just see me. We don't have
Okay.
to
Okay.
air everything out.
Yeah.
We'll just, you can see me and I can set you up with the ZBA, the whole process.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
why is she not permitted?
Because if it's if it's over 30 days, it's long-term rental, she's fine.
Right.
If she's transient, less than 30 days, then she has to be owner occupied.
and
Well,
village
here's the
resident.
thing.
in a village.
There's an
Sure.
owner of the whole building, and that owner has a real estate agent that deals with all the tenants.
The way the code's written is you're the owner of that unit, right?
I rent the unit.
Oh, so you sublease it?
Yes, I rent it. I started renting it. I
getting
know.
Leave,
You
You want to come back later?
You need to make an appointment with our zoning enforcement officer.
Is that funny?
No, you need to make an appointment so we can get through this. 'cause
No,
think you
I
have a unique
lived there for
situation.
many years and spent like thousands of
all right,
dollars
well,
fixing it up,
you-
and I still use it
I understand, and you need,
as a space for my family who comes to town and stuff, and then I have it on Airbnb. So I pay for it every month, and then I have guests.
Who's the owner of the building?
I don't know.
Oh, boy.
But I
All
have
right.
permission from my real estate agent who is in charge of renting the building. He said we could do that.
Strike
I
that
have-
from the record.
That's not
You guys got to talk in
Come
private.
see me on Monday.
I think everyone's going to talk about this.
That was what we were told we needed to do,
All right, that's.
was
all right.
have permission.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
We'll talk about it.
My name is Delise Berry, and I'm actually not a resident in the village, but I too am a real estate agent who actually, my entire business was built on vacation rentals when this whole thing started to develop 6 years ago or so. As a result, I have facilitated probably close to 1,000 rentals, and I assure you that the likelihood of people renting to more than 6 guests is so slim. And the only houses that I have that warrant that are 10,000 square feet on 30 acres. So there's like some serious facts that really need to be, in my opinion, spoken about, especially in 2 major areas of the code. One is that when it says 4 adults, but 6 total people, I find that completely off in a lot of ways. When we vet our guests and we ask questions, bodies are bodies. Children can be more disruptive than adults. If you have 3 couples coming in, that should be just as relevant as 2 families with kids. So that's one discrepancy I have. Also, the bedroom situation. I just cannot find apples to apples of a large house with a finished basement and lofts and all of these things with 2 bedrooms being handled the same way as a small house with 3 bedrooms, as we heard tonight. I mean, these things have to be more universal. And for whatever it's worth, the amount of rentals that I've dealt with, I can count the incidents on all the houses, all shapes and sizes, all over this town, on one hand. These people are kind, they want to be here, and I know that that's not relevant, but it's just relevant for the code, because 6 people is 6 people, and the number of rooms is really not translated in the size of the home, so. And then finally, just to point out on the parking spot, I don't know why it can't just be predetermined in their application process how many cars that house can accommodate, and it's simply in their Airbnb listing, and their guests know you can have 1 car and that's it. It should be really straightforward. It does, and it doesn't have to be based on the number of guests. 6 guests, 1 car. It's in the listing.
But we're trying to eliminate a zoning process to abbreviate this with the administrative permit. So we have a chart. That way we don't have to.
Oh, so there wouldn't be a permit.
That way we don't have to have a
I see.
discretionary process where you get a site plan review. We're trying to, fast track it.
What if it's just the number of parking spots that the actual house has?
It's pretty close to that.
I mean, if you don't have any parking spots, I was their agent when they bought that house doesn't even have a driveway. It's translated in the listing based on what the owner has. If you have 2 parking spots, they're allowed 2 parking spots. I mean, I don't know, in my opinion, it seems very streamlined, straightforward.
Kevin and I were actually on the same side of this issue when we were in committee on this, but.
The parking situation, you won't be able to bump that because the boards have established a very strict schedule of parking. And that's something that the planning board enforces very strictly. So with respect to that, the parking schedule is the parking schedule. I highly doubt there'll be any modifications to that. But with respect to, now, were you referencing people occupying other rooms? And so I wasn't sure what you're getting at with that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, you're allowed, okay, I think I understand it as if you become unhosted, let's say you're traveling and you rent out the house, you can still only have 2 bedrooms, is that right?
In the current
Now,
proposed
okay, and
code,
additionally, if you're doing hosted rentals, renting individual rooms, you can still only do 2?
Correct.
So you're capped at 2 no matter what. And again, if you have 3 rooms, let's say in your house, and you're owner occupied, your hosted rental, and one has a twin, the other has a queen, another twin, the fact that you can't rent those out separately.
But you could go through site plan review, you just don't have the abbreviated administrative.
Okay, that's where the site plan.
It doesn't change the impact.
That's right, that kicks you into the other category, a threshold
okay, so
over.
that's where you get approved versus you don't have to get approved if you just follow that. But it's still, so they will then approve you to have more rooms rented if you have the site plan?
If you're hosted, yeah.
If you're hosted, so if you have 5 rooms you want to rent out, you
5
can.
is okay, yeah.
And if you're unhosted and you leave, it's still only 2.
Now, when you get to
True?
the 3
Okay.
rooms, now you can't do unhosted.
Forget about
Okay.
hosted, unhosted.
So that knocked you out on hosted.
Once you hit 3 rooms,
So
you
the
can't
fact
do
is you'll
The
never.
threshold is the rooms, which kicks you into the site plan process.
And which
Okay.
now will not allow you to do non-hosted. Because now you're bed and breakfast establishment. and
I
you're always
see.
You're bigger,
hosted.
you're a bigger
So-
impact.
So I think what you might be saying is that for non-hosted, since it's an entire home rental, why even talk about the number of bedrooms?
Yeah, and the
Don't
bottom
go
line
there.
is, it's
It's
not the
6 people.
bedrooms that impact the community, it's
That's
the
right.
people.
Right.
So we have to figure out, how do we determine can a house support and a neighborhood support for the number of guests, not the rooms?
Right,
It's
so be
irrelevant.
silent about the number of rooms.
It doesn't even matter, it's the people.
Right, right.
And I just don't even think it even feels right to sort of classify based on children or adults. I mean, humans are humans, like, how many people can you accommodate? That's what this should be based on. So, that's my piece. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know,
Square footage?
the other thing that was never really considered, and I know it's short-term, but most of these houses have septic systems that are designed for families. And for instance, and so a septic system isn't designed on how many bathrooms you have, it's how many bedrooms you have. So theoretically, if you have a family of 4, that septic system is really designed based off of the bedrooms. Now, you have somebody that turns their house into a B&B and they're continuously having a lot more usage and occupancy, you know, you're gonna have a septic system that fails. And that's gonna, I mean, you know, I don't even think anybody even looked down that alley, you know what I mean? But that's something that you gotta take in consideration. And so that's why I personally believe that a restriction on people is definitely mandatory. I can't see why it wouldn't. You know, regardless of dicing up the rooms and all that, I think that if this house has 2 bedrooms and it's able to hold 2 people, and again, that calculation is strict. I mean, the state doesn't just allow, you know, tons of people crashing a place. Their guidelines are strict. I think a 10 by 10 you know, might be allowed 2. You know, then there's a 2.2, 2.4 people and so on. So, you know, and that's really designed so you don't abuse the infrastructure and you know, the septic is gonna be a big issue. Most of these houses are on septic systems. So, I don't know. I mean, you know, these are things that have to be considered.
I just want, I think, Brand, in this discussion, thank you, John. Sorry to interrupt. In this discussion, I just wanted to come back to the permitting process and who qualifies for what based upon either size or contingency. Everybody who's going to be renting out a room or a house has to register their accommodation with the village, and it needs to be inspected.
Yes.
So at the very bottom line.
Yes.
Okay. And then at a either occupancy or right now, or a bedroom number, you have to become, you then get kicked into a new category of
review.
Of review and permature?
Yeah, because you need to go through site plan review, so.
Okay.
In public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
there is a
basically, so if you're under, right now, if you're 2 or less bedrooms, you don't need site plan review, but you do need an inspection.
Right.
And if you're over, and as the way it's written, if you're over 2 bedrooms, then you need a site plan, you need an inspection and you need a permit.
Site plan.
And site plan,
public
I'm
hearing,
sorry,
get
an
that
inspection
permit.
and a site plan, and you have to have your
Which
site plan
is
approved.
the way it is now.
Okay.
Because bed and breakfast establishments
Gotcha.
require
Gotcha,
site plan.
okay. So that means if you have 2 more bedrooms, you have to go before the planning board.
If you have 3 or
Three or
between
more.
3 and 5.
Right.
If you're over
5,
5,
okay.
you have to do it.
I'm James Sololia from the Art Building. Bunch of points, but a couple, just 2 sort of factual points first. One is the septic issue. We actually looked at that for our vacation rentals. What happens is, because you're not renting out for full weeks, the impact on a weekly basis is, even in a crazily well-rented house, is less than the bedroom count with people living there full-time. We looked at this because we didn't want our septics to fail. So we've actually did it and stress tested it. So that really isn't an issue, because generally you're a 2-night-a-week rental, and what the waste they produce in 2 nights doesn't equal the 7 nights that a permanent resident would produce. So that's one. Secondly, the real estate license issue. That's not really relevant. The issue is any real estate licensure related issues has to do with the signing of leases. As the owner, you can sign the lease. It's being an agent to the owner that's the issue. For the nighttime, to Rudy's point, to the nighttime calls and stuff, a superintendent is fine.
No, that's true.
So you don't need, like, the whole idea of because you're only allowing hosted, by definition, you're sort of like probably, well, not by definition, but more than likely than not, you're not using an agent, you're doing it yourself for 40 nights a week, and
Even though
therefore
you're
it's not
here.
triggering.
The presumption is kind of that you're not here, so maybe you're not leasing.
The non-hosted, the hosted,
The-
there, that's not.
That's what I said, in the hosted version. So
And
what I'm
it's not
saying is
rented.
what they're really talking about is I think you need a superintendent, you don't necessarily need a real estate. So I think that whole thing
No,
is.
what
sort
I'm
of
saying
ill-conceived.
is when you're non-hosted, you're not really here. If you're in Costa Rica and somebody's leasing out your property, signing the lease, collecting the rent, that's the real estate activity.
You're usually not signing and renting, but okay, yeah, it doesn't usually work that way. It usually is paid in advance, and it's probably done directly to the, so again, it depends how you do it, but my guess is that the signing of the leases and the payments would not happen to that person that's getting the call in the night. But anyhow, I'm just saying, like, that just needs to be worked out, because it's not consistent with just.
So James, so with
So that
respect to
those-
the septic, that was brought up to me by David Pearson from the Department of Health.
Yeah.
And you know David?
No.
He's like the senior engineer, and he's the one that brought it up to me about the usage of the septic. Regardless of long-term, the immediate impact, so, you know, if there's X amount of people, everybody taking showers, it's the impact of the usage at that time, not over the duration.
Right, I mean, that's why you shouldn't have, more, but your point is right, that there shouldn't be more people than
But
bedrooms.
that was his concern. His
Right.
concern as an engineer for the Department of Health was that it could potentially be an issue. Some of these older homes just have
Just have
cesspools.
yeah, exactly.
And they're on the verge of failure with a regular family size. Now, you introduce a B&B establishment into that, you're definitely having a failure. So but again, I don't have, and I'm not an engineer, I'm just saying.
No,
Yeah,
I don't want to get into this, but the point is that, yeah.
But I have to worry about it, but all right.
No, but if you're renting for 40 days a year, you know, you're likely renting for 2 days a week, and the likelihood of creating a septic failure in those 2 days, if you're not loading a house up to 30 people, again, I just think the math,
All right.
we looked at it, we were concerned. The two more relevant issues for the code, one is that I'm not really the guy that, is that focused on the hosted side of things. That's just not my issue, but just a couple things to consider. I do think you should have some sort of variance to allow these things to happen. And there's reasons why. There's all kinds of, the reason why any variance exists is because there's situations that come up where you may want this person to be able to do that. Let me give you some case in point. During the financial crisis, a lot of people saved their homes because of Airbnb, right? Just fact. Can't pay the rent, have to move out, move in with someone else, someone dies, can't sell the house. Airbnb is something that allows you to float some of the rent. So a variance for something like that. Someone gets sick, you gotta go to Florida. You don't know if you're gonna be there for a month or a year. You don't wanna rent it out. Rent it, you might wanna come back every couple weeks. Vacation rental is a good mechanism to pay for that, right? There's people whose lives, like, have grandma coming here for 6 months a year because she spends the other 6 months somewhere else. You want to consider stuff like that. And for me personally, there's great historic buildings in town like Barnes, one of which we were talking about saving and renovating, that's now been put on hold or stopped, basically, because they can't do vacation rental in it. Like, you want to save the material culture of the town, vacation rental is a way to do it. You're not going to put a regular market rate rental for $1,000 a month in Rhinebeck and save that barn or that carriage house. My point is not to advocate for any of these things in particular, but there should be a variance process that allows people to, rather than permit it, in a code sense, there should be cases in which people can make a case and sort of say, hey, my situation should allow me, either permanently or for some short term, to do this.
We have that.
That exists.
But I mean, even more longer than the 40 day is my point. Again, that person that might need to rent it for half a year.
A person has the option to ask for a use variance. The application for a use variance is $450. And they can argue their case, and if they show that there's a hardship, then the ZBA will take it in consideration and vote accordingly.
Okay.
So that exists.
So, I mean, if that's the.
$450 back if you guys say no?
Okay, but anyhow, that's.
No.
So that's for the hosted, and what I'm concerned about is the unhosted. I don't know how many unhosted are there in town, do we know?
We don't know.
Too many.
Maybe 36 would be max.
You can't really be,
36.
you can't be an impartial arbiter of this if you're saying too many.
But this is,
Well-
do you live in Rhinebeck?
No.
All right.
I mean, I don't live in the village, I live in the town.
All I'm saying, and I'm not casting judgment, all I'm saying is, you have an investor's view of it, you have people who live here forever and their view of it. I understand what you're saying, but what you're saying.
I wasn't saying anything yet.
Oh.
I didn't
Okay.
say my point yet.
Oh, you haven't?
He does live in Rhinebeck.
But I thought your point was that if people want to be able to use something other than what's being applied, they can go for a variance.
Well, that was my point for the hosted, of which I am not a part. I don't do hosted rentals. I was
Okay.
just making that point that I think having a clear path to variances is just something that I think is civically responsible for the kinds of cases
Right.
that I just laid out. I mean, I think it's a civic responsibility to allow people to do this kind of thing because it saves people in the financial crisis, it can help you when your mom's sick, and because it can save that historic building in the back of your house that's going to fall down otherwise. So I think that's one.
Excuse me, James, but if I heard you, we have a process to allow
Yes.
for that.
Yeah. We can't change the standard for variances, it's a state.
It's okay, if that's allowed for vacation rentals as well.
For anything, anything that's.
Anything, but it's a high, it is a high bar, I mean, that was what John was pointing out.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the second thing, my point is for the non-hosted, which we run a bunch of them here and elsewhere, and currently own 2 in the village. You know, I didn't want to speak earlier because clearly most of the people in this room are not in that camp. You know, look, it's sort of on the one hand, I see why you want to outlaw it. I see why you want to prohibit it. I've sort of admitted defeat on this. And I knew that was going to happen a year ago when this whole thing came up because the writing was on the wall. But you got to acknowledge that this has been something that I've been doing above board, and we've been doing above board, Pamela and others, for a long time. I mean, this has not been a secret activity. This has been widely advertised, marketed, very public, spoken about. Probably people in this room have known people or have actually stayed in some of these or had family that stayed in some of these. And the idea is, the concept of grandfathering, regardless of what the legal definition of grandfathering is sort of like, hey, you weren't doing anything wrong, and now we're putting out a law that's pulling the rug out from under you. So grandfathering sort of says, hey, in acknowledgement of the fact that you were never really doing anything wrong to begin with, we're going to sort of figure out some way to make this okay for those people who are already doing it. Now, there's an argument that says this was not allowed, this was not a permitted use for the last 7 years publicly, but it was not a permitted, you know, it's legal in New York State, right? It was not breaking a state law. There was no specific prohibitions against it, and there weren't even implicit prohibitions against it. The outcry has to do with how much this is happening and people's reaction to that. But the fact is that, you know, I bought these properties, I think others in this room have probably bought properties and sort of created a financial structure in our lives and businesses that have, you know, underwritten our ability to do this. And you sort of can't pull the rug out from under us this way without creating enormous financial hardship. So now that's not to say that you don't have the right to sort of prohibit it on a go-forward basis, but you have to consider that some people are in this business and have been in it for a long time, either to help, you know, float their apartments or houses, or because they did it as a business. And you shouldn't legislate something that's gonna, you know, just crush those people. And that's exactly what this is gonna do.
Devil's advocate, if I converted my house to a 4-unit property, it's not permitted. It's, you know, basically illegal, and I didn't tell John. then, and I did it for 6 years and nothing really went wrong, do you think that I should be grandfathered in, or, I mean?
Did you know it was illegal when you did it? Did you know you were doing something that was, did you know you were doing something that was against the code? It's an important question.
No, it wasn't against, it was not explicitly.
Okay, so you didn't know.
It says registered host is in the code. We have a woman here who has a real B&B or a traditional B&B. It's in the code.
No, it's not. This is a technology that's about a decade old.
Listen,
The code did not.
I've been speeding home every day, and I know that the speed zone is 40, but I've been doing 60. But I haven't been caught. But, and I know.
It's not at all applicable.
Well, did you?
Listen, first of all.
Pamela, did you know that you were?
That's an ignorance of the code.
When you were doing your STR?
That's not how state.
Well, but that's sure that.
There is a board, well, what I'm getting to.
Whoa. One discussion at a time, please, because everybody has to follow the discussion.
The board has the discretion, if you believe that these operators they had a reasonable expectation that they were operating legally, it is within your discretion to do some permitting to allow them to continue. That's within your discretion.
I think it could be challenged for spot zoning if we did that. If we pick 4 or 5 of these and we say, okay, you're all right,
So
we're gonna get sued.
What's gonna happen is this, we're gonna put this together and say you wanna do these little grandfather things in. You're gonna send it to the county, and the county's gonna look at it, and they're gonna say specifically what you just said. This is basically violates all zoning regulations. And the county's basically gonna prohibit us from actually passing it.
So there you don't think there's any possibility of finding any path for people like Dara or Pam or James? Is there any path to, like if James was allowed to operate under the same constraints as all the other non-hosted, i.e., all the constraints other than it's not owner occupied and you're not a resident, is there a way to achieve that?
Well, we tried to fall back on possibly having a property manager. The main idea was to hold somebody accountable if something happened. A water pipe breaks, a fire, the unit runs out, whatever it is, we need to hold somebody accountable. And that was the main issue here. And that was a major complaint from the police department. I go out there, it's just the tenants. I don't know who to talk to. We don't even know who the property owner is. So anyway, that was the concept of trying to eliminate the non-hosted situation.
Except in our case, we have a full-time call help desk, like you'd call a doctor's office, and we have two part-time superintendents who are on call every moment of every day.
And that's registered with the village?
No, I mean, we just do it because that's the right thing to do,
Yeah,
so
but
that we can be accountable.
But what I'm saying.
But we don't have a process to
Right.
register it today, so it could be registered.
Yeah.
But it could do it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that, now, mind you, there's a committee for this.
Right.
And the majority of the committee is not here. I'm sorry?
We had a committee that went over this, and there's
Subcommittee.
3 of us that were here. But what we talked about was the nature of neighborhoods, and the nature of civic involvement, and the need for families, however that's constituted, and that we don't want to take homes, if you look at homes as inventory, we don't want to take homes off the shelf. We're already losing homes because they're becoming museum pieces. We have people coming up, they're buying $1.2 million homes, and they're just coming up for the weekends. And we need.
Are you referring to the $1.2 million house that I just sold to a weekender? Is that the
No, I'm sorry, I did not know that.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, it was just.
No, I don't.
No, there's
Sorry,
several
I
1.2 million
chose
houses.
I might be singled out here, sorry.
It was an outhouse?
What?
You said it was an outhouse?
No, all right, hold on, let's get back into control here.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know.
$1 million house.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sold to a weekender.
I think it was just a statement. Let's
After
move.
I just happened to sell a 1.2
James,
million.
All right, no, I did
Don't take it
not know,
personally.
James, I did not know that, okay?
Let's move on.
By coincidence.
Let's move on,
I don't know,
okay?
it's a little
James,
bit
let's
Okay.
move on.
Okay, we need to go to the next.
We're not,
Yeah, so, thank you. So,
I
your
feel
point,
that
your
you're
special,
being-
your condition is a variance for special needs. That's, and on host, and you had two. One was variance, to get back to the code, one was variance, the second was on-hosted grandfathering.
Those are my points.
Yes, okay.
And I think some
Thank
of this
you.
is being done punitively.
No. Deliberations in the committee were not punitive at all, so. And no, I did not know about your house, I'm sorry, I just.
Yeah.
My name is Pat, I spoke before, and I just wanted to give you, again, some information about Rhinebeck. I have had a bed and breakfast for 20 years. I have 4 bedrooms in my house. Before I started my bed and breakfast, I came to the village board to ask, what are the regulations? What are the rules? What is allowed? I would like to do this, but is this allowed? I got all my information first. I didn't come and start it up and say, I'm doing what I want to do because I want to do this to make money. And actually, it all boils down to money. So I only rent 1 room in my house, but I have 4 bedrooms. But I found out and I asked first. I didn't come to Rhinebeck and say, it looks lovely. My family's been here since 1942. And we'd like to keep just a not a minimum, but we'd like to just have not a growth that is totally out of control. And I think to keep a minimum to 2 to 4 people is a good thing. You cannot change the rules and make variance for every other person. I was in real estate 5 years ago.
So, but, sorry. in
No, but
respect
people
to the
would
code,
ask, no, but people
code-
would buy something and they'd say, what is the zoning? Is it a mother-daughter house? Is it a 2-family house? They didn't just buy it and then expect
In
to
respect to the
change.
code that we're discussing tonight.
Okay, I would
Please.
like to hold down the population to what you have set it to, because I think it's very reasonable. And nothing here for anyone else, from what I can see, is, quote, grandfathered. And I think you've been very good with what you've decided upon. It'll hold down the population. It'll keep Rhinebeck quaint, which is what everybody likes, and know your neighbors. Make it possible that some of all of these rentals would be available to young people to maybe buy homes and rent homes.
Sorry, we got it. Thank you. All right, so I want to get back to one thing. I believe in here that you guys have allowed for 60 days. 6 months, excuse me, 6 months, right?
It's like an amnesty provision. Yeah.
So there's an amnesty provision, just I want to make everybody aware of that. That there's this, right, currently in this draft, there's a 6-month amnesty.
And that doesn't mean it starts right now, because it's
No,
not
it's
law.
not law.
So it could be 8 months. It could be long, yeah, that's what
It
I'm.
doesn't start until we
Right,
the
right, just so everybody knows it's not starting
code
tonight.
gets vetted
Yeah,
and adopted.
right.
Right.
The what? Can
Any
I-
other questions?
I got it. Oh, go ahead. I have a question that was brought up by this lady here when you were talking about parking on the streets, right? This is for you, John, I guess. What does the law say now? You can't park in front of your house?
The front plane of the house.
Front plane.
Other than
You're
a
talking,
driveway.
Yeah.
you're talking about on your lawn, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's-
so that doesn't mean the street, though?
No.
Okay.
So we did add one limitation on that. Not only, we refer back to the chart, which has bed and breakfast establishments and then, you know, now room rental homes. But then we added one sentence in here that says,
Page 2?
it says you can't expand your driveway. Okay, I think in 120-17G, the last sentence, any required additional parking should not be allowed in front of a principal structure by expanding use of an existing driveway. So the implication is that you can, utilize the existing driveway. But that you also have to comply with that parking chart.
And the only restriction to the street was our snow ordinance.
Right, right,
Which we just
yeah.
You know, with respect to James, I mean, you can't be ignorant to the code. If you're in the business to rent your places out, you take the time out to read the zoning law and see if it's, one, acceptable. And if it isn't, then you come to the zoning officer and you discuss what you can and can't do. You know, he's rattling off that he has all these great, contacts, but this office doesn't know that. And I'm not saying his places are out of hand, but you comply with the code. You don't become ignorant. And the other thing is, there are variances that you can ask for. He didn't even know what a variance was. I mean, it's not something we're just pulling out of the air. This thing's been established back in the early 80s, when the village adopted the code. So, be aware of what you're investing in and what you're looking to do. Just don't ask for forgiveness after you've already done it. And that's the case in that situation, so.
Well, also, what we're proposing is to make this more permissive. I mean, that's the more permissive than what we have now, which does not allow for non-hosted rentals, period. Now, that's a discussion we're all going to have, the actual terms of this, but.
Yes, please. I'm sorry, you have to come up to the microphone, because that way it works for the camera as well.
What's your name again?
Dara Jensen. Is there a place online or something where a person can see how many rooms there are available in Rhinebeck through the bed and breakfasts and inns or hotels, motels?
Not that the village maintains.
No, yeah, there's a website for Airbnb. That's how my secretary found out that there's all these illegal Airbnbs.
No, I know the Airbnb. I'm just talking about bed and breakfasts. And
bed and breakfasts are
does anybody
registered.
here know how many rooms there are available in Rhinebeck through motels like the Beekman Arms?
Does the
How
Chamber of
many
Commerce
rooms?
have anything?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce would know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they would
But
know it
nobody
better
here
than
knows
anybody
that.
else.
Nobody here knows.
No. We can look it up. Rick.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the board?
I just want to say that I think that the people on the committee, John, all you gentlemen, did a really great job. I think and people brought up some issues here, but on the whole, this is really a terrific job. Actually, and I think you can tell, people have questions, people need clarifications, but people really, I think, understand where you're trying to go with this, and I think it sees wide acceptance. So I think you guys have all done, I know it's been really hard to do. I think you guys have done a good job, and you're moving in the right direction. There may be some trimming and some things that come around, but this is really a terrific effort. I just really want to put that on the record.
I second.
All in favor?
Kevin, Brad, you guys really dug into this. It's not easy. This is so thorny and difficult.
We have to get it right.
Yes.
So let's be clear.
Yes, that's right, man.
So moving forward, this was a workshop. Do you feel that we need another workshop?
Yes.
You do?
I don't know.
Okay, we can do that.
You guys want you think we should have another workshop?
Yeah, we have a lot of good ideas, you guys are open to a lot of different things, so it'd be great if you come back with some tweaks, and just take another look at it.
Now, there's a structural issue in that we don't really have the committee anymore, so.
Right. Well, we haven't disbanded the committee.
No, but.
You guys have presented a draft, but the committee is not decommissioned.
Okay.
Let's be very clear about it. It is not decommissioned.
We have to get the band back together.
Yes. Yeah, you may have to come back for.
It sounded like you were wanting to revisit the bedroom size versus the house size. I mean.
All that. Yeah. That was the most common thing that came up with.
So I believe there are some issues that the committee should go back and readdress and come back forward and tell us where they want to refine it, change it, or whatever.
You know, the code, for the most part, was I think, what we agreed to. I have a few little nits with it, but, for the most part, is what we agreed to. Shouldn't we expect something from you now to say, we've looked at your code, here's what you thought, but here's areas that we think need to be looked at?
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and then.
I think
you
we
kinda-
should, I think we owe something to the committee.
Agreed.
I think that's part of the process.
Yes.
Yes.
The county's going to weigh in also.
Well, the county weighs in after we release it to the county, right? Or is that?
No, you're right.
We have to get our attorney to look it
Yes.
over, and
Yeah.
then we take his draft, take it to
Yes.
the county,
Right.
excuse me,
So there is a process.
and then we would go to public hearing, I think, so.
Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate, very good questions. It was a very good workshop. I make a motion that we close the workshop.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.